I think it's important to know something about the humanity of Tyree Nichols beyond the reductionism of racialized police brutality. Tyree, a 29-year-old father, was on his way home after taking photos of the sky before being pulled over on the 7th of January by police. And on his website, he writes about photography. Photography helps me to see the world in more creative ways. And my vision is to draw viewers deeply into a vision of the world that I see through my eyes and out through the lens. Seeing the world anew. This is exactly what the Black Canadian poet and novelist Dionne Brand also said when asked in an interview to describe what her poetry is trying to do. And Brand says, poetry breaks and glues back grammar and asks us to see the world through the cracks. There are lots of cracks. And as I look at all of you who are partners and friends in this work, what we are increasingly seeing through the cracks surely has to be about change and conflict and such complexities. As I was just saying, that this work is embedded everywhere. I'm grateful that we have a friendship and partnership in Alfonso and Team Dynamics, who have helped us to grow and expand and deepen beyond the prose of this work and into its poetic truth. To recognize the patterns, the rhymes, the cadence, the meters of this work. As we come to this training in our relationship with you, Alfonso, and Team Dynamics, we're so grateful for your insights and perspective and the wise teachings that you have challenged this community with. It's in the newsletter, but I wanted to be sure to just prompt your attention that toward the middle of February and into the middle of March, there is a 4-part series that spells out such complexities. It's a series on intersectionalities. It's about the way that so many identities come together and dynamics are conjoined that complicate this work, from LGBTQ issues to beyond Black-white dynamics, to how socioeconomic and class dynamics intersect with race. These are everywhere. And so we're also excited. I'm anticipating a lot of us deepening our way of seeing and hearing that complex poetry that this work is calling us to. With that, Alfonso, thank you again.
Good morning. It's good to be with you. Thanks for the invitation back to spend a Saturday morning together. Before we get into our content for the day, I'll ask you to stand as you are able. Now, and turn to someone near you and ask them, how are you arriving this morning? And listen to their answer. And then you can share how you are arriving this morning. To let folks know that we are recording today's session. So mostly my voice and any questions you ask in the big room will get recorded. We will hit pause on the sound and the recording. while you're in small groups or pairs or sharing, and there will be probably at least a third of our time you will spend in small groups outside of this room or in circles in this room, and we won't be recording that part. But the sort of front of the room, I guess you could call classroom parts of this morning will get recorded. So just wanted folks to know that you'll have access to that. I'm referencing today a lot of different material, and we'll make sure that we circulate a list with links to all the different books and reference materials and things like that for today. One of the things that I talk about a lot is the fact that injustice is so large, is so big, is at times hard to comprehend the scale at which injustice operates, that we can get captured in the enormity of injustice. And oftentimes, when we're captured in the enormity of injustice, our practice primarily becomes admiration or critique or stillness or inability to move. So we're just sort of in awe at how big injustice is. And we confuse that for a racial justice practice. We confuse having a vocabulary around racism, or we confuse our ability to quote racial justice activists and authors with a practice. And so today will really be about noticing how you show up in your racial justice work, and an invitation from awareness and into practice. And one of the things that helps us when we are captured in that enormity is having a really specific goal. So I want each of you to spend some time right now writing or meditating on your goal. Why are you here? What do you hope to get out of today? Why did you say yes to a morning on complexity and conflict? So spend some quiet time now, grounding in on your goal. Today will happen in today will happen in 3 parts. The first part will be an invitation to reflect on our relationships to certainty and to comfort. Then we will engage the work once again, or oh my gosh, I can't believe again for some of us, the work of Tima Okun and the elements of white supremacy culture. But what we will do is we will emphasize the antidotes. And then in our third part, we will talk about the characters we play in conflict and how we can use conflict to build trust. So that's what you can anticipate in terms of our time together. A few words on comfort and certainty. How many folks have interacted with the IDI or the intercultural development in the target continuum? Many of us. So here's what we know as a reminder. Many of us, nearly 70% of us, show up in that minimization mindset. Minimization is a mindset that cares deeply about human dignity, cares deeply about fairness, and we call minimization a transitional mindset. We have one foot in the monocultural or ethno-relative space, and we have one foot in the intercultural, we have one foot in the monocultural or ethnocentric space, and one foot in the intercultural and ethno-relative space. So what does that mean? It means we believe in race as a construct. It means we believe in goals relative to racial justice. It means we are working to understand that we live in a racialized context. So that's sort of our capacity to have all of those things. And at the same time, we think we can solve racial justice with the tools and the practices we currently have. We're primarily interested in certainty and comfort. So in minimization, we think things like, should we have a land acknowledgement and what should it say? How can we spend our money differently to repair for the damage of enslaving Africans on this continent, right? So we think in sort of checklists. Did we do it? Did we not do it? How will I know I'm being racially just? We also, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly, but pretty much most of the time, engage in patterns and practices that serve the comfort of the dominant culture. So whatever the dominant culture of the church is, and what we know in our society, we are currently inside of a dominant culture that preferences whiteness and preferences masculinity. So we think, we believe, we prey on, we focus on the fact that there is racial injustice. And the way we orient to solutions is primarily about certainty, knowing did I do it or not do it, checklists, and implicitly and explicitly maintaining comfort. White supremacy and whiteness have convinced us that there's a finality, or that knowing is sort of finite, that there is an end to or a completion to our work of justice. And what we actually know is there's sort of infinite possibility. But whiteness serves as a function, whiteness's function was developed for the purposes of control, to control land, to control labor, to control money, and to control bodies. And so whiteness needs us to believe that we can be complete, that there's a finite amount of resources and energy, and that there's knowing, and it is possible to know things, to know all things, and that we can check off boxes. So whiteness says, okay, fine, there is racism, oops. Like whiteness really treats racism like an oops, not a on-purpose project. And then it says, okay, oops, can we check off a couple boxes? And on the way to checking off those boxes, can we at least stay comfortable? Can we not disrupt status quo? Can we do things as we've always done them? And as we travel that intercultural development continuum into the mindsets of acceptance and adaptation, we're less sure, we're less certain. We have more questions than we do answers. We begin to release this sort of finality or desire for finite. And we're a little less comfortable more of the time. All day, every day, I talk about race and gender. I can speak about it with ease. I'm rarely comfortable. Our job as we move into acceptance and adaptation is to notice all the patterns we're in, where we seek certainty, where we orient our behaviors around comfort, and where we believe our current practice is what will set us free. That's hard, right? There's like grit to it. It's clunky. It's probably not in a book. Just everybody breathe. Breathe. We're laughing because there's discomfort there. It's not in a book. It's not even in any conversation, singular conversation we have this morning. Some of it might be here, and some of it might be in a book. Some of it might be in an interaction, and some of it might be in your meditation. Some of it might be while you're listening to someone speak in a different context. So our work is about moving away from patterns and practices that reorient our comfort and reorient comfort of white dominant culture. Our work is about saying, I can't be certain, but I can keep asking questions. So let's engage that with a spell. from a new favorite book from the Emergent Strategy series, Fables and Spells. It's not the one you have in your hands. That will be our closing spell. So this spell is called a complex movement. Over and over again, it becomes known the peace we seek is seeking us. The joy of full bud awaiting our attention, justice in our hands, longing to be practiced, the whole world learning from within. This thrilling mote in the universe, laboratory, labyrinth. Internalize demands. You are the one you are waiting for. Externalize love. Bind us together into a greater self, a complex movement, a generative abundance, an embodied evolution. Learn to be here. Critique is a seductress, her door always open. So what if you get some? We are going further, past reform, to wonder. This requires comprehension that cannot fit in words. Out beyond our children, beyond the end of time, there's a ceaseless cycle, a fractal of sublime, and we come to create it, to soil our hands and faces, loving, loving, and loving ourselves and all our places. So your first reflection. The spell asks us to be here. So you might think the initial prompt on the screen is a little bit obvious, but I am at church. We are gathered collectively to engage complexity in pursuit of racial justice ends. What are my body, heart, and mind telling me right now? Is there a deeper need underneath this? What words describe my needs in this moment and in this context? Spend a few quiet minutes with those prompts and write down some of your thinking. Set this reflection next to your goals. Given what your body, mind, and heart need, does your goal change? Do you have different, or is there a shift in purpose for you today or not? I'm actually asking, so reflect with it. Part of what we do is 3 weeks ago, I signed up for this thing. It's on the calendar, so I'm going. Because I'm someone who says I'm going to do the things I'm going to do in that church, and they might not see my face, or I'm supposed to because I'm this, or I do this ministry, or there's all these reasons I'm supposed to or should, or I came here because. And then you're here now, how you are. So sit for a few moments with your goal. Does your goal shift, or is it still the same? And as you're able, go ahead and place one hand on your chest and one on your belly. Take a couple deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth, whatever pace works for you. And just thank your body, your heart, your mind for arriving how they are with what they need, with the goals that you have. With your next breath, you can return to the room. I have some instructions to give you for the next activity. Giving 80 adults instructions is hard because we think we know what we're supposed to do. So I'm going to give instructions, and then I'm going to ask 2 people to tell me back what we're going to do. Sound good? All right. I'm not being mean, I'm being honest. The important part for the listening right now is in blue on the screen if you can see color. So in this activity, you will pair up with someone. It does not have to be the someone you came with or are sitting near. You will sit back to back. Ideally, your chair or shoulders or arms greeting each other or tapping each other if you can. So make physical contact back to back as is possible. So you'll pair off, you'll go somewhere. It doesn't have to be in this room. You will have 10 minutes to find your person, go to your somewhere, and do the exercise. 10-ish minutes. You'll find a person, you'll find a place, you'll do the exercise. Before you find your person, you have to write down these questions or take a picture of these questions. Everyone will need written or a picture. It didn't say go yet, it's like Simon says. And then each person will respond to the questions for 3 minutes. You'll just listen. So if I'm with Mary, we'll grab our chairs, we'll pick a spot, we'll sit down back to back, shoulders or arms touching if we can. We'll say who's going to go first. Mary will say, I'll go first. Mary will respond to those questions for 3 minutes. Then I'll say, thanks, Mary. And then I'll share my response for 3 minutes. Can someone on this side of the room let me know what the instructions are? What did you hear?
Activity, trusting, go through a space with that partner, to back person as their own full 3 minutes to respond to the questions the partner just listened.
Thank you. Can someone on this side of the room repeat for me? Yes.
Take 3 minutes to find a partner. Position yourself sitting back, hopefully with the some part of your body touching. And then each of you is going to take 3 minutes to answer or respond to the question listed up here.
Y'all got it. Really good. You're on it this morning. If for any reason, and you don't have to share your reason, you're not up for arms or shoulders touching today, just say like, I'm not up for arms or shoulders touching today, and you don't have to tell anybody why. So go ahead now, capture the questions, pictures, or writing. We will reconvene at 10. We'll reconvene at 10. You don't have to sit down or reorganize when you come back. Just come back, be in this room at 10. Go. Let's go. A lot of things. I think some of it is compromise. You could get people for an hour.
I didn't grow up Catholic, so I didn't know a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I used to live near a Catholic church when I was pastor of the state Methodist. And again, they would, yeah, like day,
Yeah.
you know. My organist who at work in Catholic church, he said, "I don't understand. Yeah, that you show up. Like, it's a venial sin. Don't go there.
Probably. I don't remember. I don't.
It's a venial sin. It's like how still that road is. People are going there because it is.
You're supposed to have. You know. Right. Right. Welcome back. Welcome back. Don't get too comfortable. You are going to move again very soon. Mostly today. Your next task. Go on. Your next task is to form a group of 10. You're going to form a group of 10, and that will be your group for the rest. There will be no more group forming. That will be your group. For groups of 8 are okay. Groups of 9 are okay. No more than 10, it'll just be hard to participate. So form a group of 10 people. That will be your conversation group for the rest of the morning. So friends, I'm curious, and I'm sure some other people might be curious, what that experience was like. So I'm going to ask a few people to share. I don't need the full recap of what happened in your first pair or what happened in your circle. I'm curious what that experience was like for you. How did you experience that experience? I would love to hear from at least 3 people. What was that like for you? KP and maybe Barbara. KP and Barbara are moving around with mics. We are recording, so please speak into the mic. What was that experience like for you? All right, thanks for getting started.
Can you hear me okay? I think the biggest thing that I noticed was when we were physically touching, my brain shut off so I could actually hear and listen. And when we were another time to share, we were not physically touching, and I noticed my own narrative creeping in instead of I had to pause and kind of shut it out so that I could go back to listening to understand versus listening to respond.
Thank you for getting us started. So for you, the back-to-back part afforded listening to the words, and then the facing was, oh, I'm doing all this filtering, and I'm coming up with my own story or potentially my own response. Or that reminder to, oh, come back to here, right? Come back to what's happening. Thank you. How about for others? What was that experience like?
I am quite smart, and so I noticed like what? Get in a circle and 2 people read back to back? No. So yeah, really big scare. But then so we go in the room and back to share. Anyway, ultimately, I really appreciate Dylan's sharing himself.
Thank you. So for you, the instructions brought fear, right? There could be unknown, there could be, I don't do this. The setup. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's not what we do at church or at school or at work. This is unnatural, right? So as humans sitting upright in rows, we're not like our nervous systems are in a sort of performance mode when we have to sit. Like the circles help us be like, oh, there you are. Physical touch helps us be like, okay, like there's a grounding and you're you and I'm me and I can listen, right? So there's something about getting out of performance mode that helps us have a different kind of connection or might reset or say like, oh geez, I'm used to just this and I can be me and I can sort of be in a group but separate from the group or whatever it is. Thank you. One more, please. We're waiting for the mics.
By the way, Parish Hall mics are on that order. We ordered them 3 months ago.
Same. Yeah, if you want to make omelets, you have to make some eggs. And I feel there are a bunch of eggs.
All right. Yes. Yes. I love that thing, right? We have to be a little less careful with cracking open with each other, right? That's what this work requires. Thank you for that. I lost my thought, so we'll hear from one more person and then move on.
I just sense vulnerability. And in being vulnerable, there has to be a level of trust. And I felt that in my peer, and I also felt that in the circle. And I have a lot of gratitude for that we can be together doing work. We have that fear, we have that discomfort. We're asking each other to be vulnerable and open and trust each other that we hold judgment. We hold each other in love as we do this work.
Thank you. Yeah, the vulnerability required to actually be in a community of practice, not a community of sitting and listening, right? It's really different. They require the revisiting of discomfort each time I go. Oh, if I'm showing up, I might be asked to participate. I might have to or get to listen to something I didn't know. I might have to reckon with, oh, that's who you are and how you are and who I am and how I am. And we both claim this community and we're wrestling in this particular way, right? As I walked around, I heard at least 20 people, I'll say roughly, notice that they arrived thinking, oh, I'll just sit and listen and learn. There'll be some of that. I'm about to do some talking, so you can let your shoulders drop and get your notebooks out if that's what you came here for this morning. But know that after I talk for about 10 minutes, there will be more sharing. Because like I said, complexity is about practice, not just taking in information. Some of us are very familiar with Tima Okun and Kenneth Jones and their writings that's now 20, maybe 30 years old around white supremacy culture. And Tima, a year or two ago, what did she do? She reminded us that there isn't a right way to wrestle with white supremacy culture, but we've all found the wrong way to do it. And she said, dearest community of racial justice activists, these are not a list of things to punish your peers with. Our job is to not walk around with a clipboard and say, urgency, written word, binary thinking. The list exists as a reminder to catch ourselves and to establish practice. So she rewrote the 20-year-old article and said white supremacy culture still here. She collapsed it a little bit. There used to be 13, now there's 9, because some of these are kind of different versions of the same thing. And she said, certainly we have to be in a practice of noticing and naming when we find ourselves in these patterns. But more urgently and more importantly, we have to engage the antidotes. Racial justice work is not pointing and punishing when we see someone else exemplifying these. Racial justice work is greeting white supremacy culture with an antidote. There is no grade for pointing out and shaming. So we can put our clipboards and our hall monitor pass away. And just like with hearing someone else experiencing today differently and saying, I didn't come here for that. Oh, could I greet my experience of white supremacy culture with an antidote? One of the books I'm pulling some of my reflection from today is We Will Not Cancel Us, which is also a part of the Emergent Strategy series by Adrienne Maree Brown. And in this book, she links conflict and principled struggle with abolition. And we live in this litigious society that savors and relishes in punishment. And Tima's concern about white supremacy culture is it turned into a way to punish each other rather than practice together. And so now we turn toward the antidotes. If we believe we can heal, punishment is not part of our healing. So these 9 things, let's talk about them, but more importantly, let's talk about the antidotes. So one of the elements of white supremacy culture is fear, being afraid of the unknown, being afraid of new, being afraid when we're uncertain. Our antidote, our practice, is developing a practice for meeting our fear. Hello, fear, there you are. What are you here to tell me? Are you founded or unfounded? Is there something to be afraid of here? Or is this new and unknown? Avoid letting fear drive your beliefs, your actions, and decisions. We greet it and we investigate it. It's not that there's never anything to be afraid of, but oftentimes we confuse discomfort for fear or lack of safety. I'm uncomfortable, so I must be unsafe. If I am in fact unsafe, if I'm not well enough to be in principled struggle, let's find resources or let's depart, right? So how do I greet that fear? One right way, this is that certainty thing, the idea that we can be perfect or we engage in paternalism, I know better than you. Objectivity, as folks with a liberal or progressive bent, we think we know the truth. We certainly believe in science. And communities who've been on this land before us knew how to take care of this land before white scientists said we need to know how to take care of this land better. So we think we know the facts, when actually science is just repeating what indigenous tradition has taught us, right? We believe we can be qualified or unqualified to do something, right? So we think there's singular ways of being or knowing. And what's true is whatever I'm engaging with, whether it's reading or an image or a relationship, we're all impacted by our worldview. So we can ask the antidote to believing there's one right way, one of the antidotes, going, oh, this is how I'm experiencing this. I wonder how others are experiencing this. I have my worldview, which tells me some things already. Especially the things that we think are true, done, laminated, put it on the wall. Might I be experiencing this differently? question and get comfortable with the limits of our knowing. There are things I don't know, ways of being I'm unfamiliar with, and I don't have to become expert in them in order to allow them to be true for someone else. Either or thinking in the binary that we treat issue or challenge with A or B answers, rather than saying what are the multiple ways we might approach this question, this challenge, this opportunity. Especially in the minimization mindset, we try to oversimplify really complex things rather than saying, this is complex beyond our ability to grasp it, and we're going to engage it, and there's some things we might try, and there are things we might be forgetting to try, and somebody else or somebody's else might be trying differently. And how do those go together? How do those diverge? Resist that urge to assign a single cause to a challenge. This is broken, so the cause must be this, only this, forever this, and never anything else. And acknowledge that when we're having a conversation about racial justice, we don't need to compete for attention around other issues of oppression. White supremacy is part of the root of all forms of oppression. So if we begin from there, we know that if our primary area of marginalization is gender, gender conversations are about white supremacy and racial justice. If our primary area of struggle and marginalization is our queerness or our transness, that wrestle, that struggle is a racial justice issue in the struggle. If we grew up poor, working poor, or have moved economic class of our time, our caste system on this continent is a racialized caste system. So we can't separate them. We greet them, we acknowledge these things go together. And the idea that we would compete for attention on justice issues serves white supremacy. Denial and defensiveness. This is that stance we take when someone's ideas or a group's ideas are new or different, or we're part of a community that has a lot of tradition. And because I like their tradition and someone's offering something else, that we should deny its validity or defend or protect that rather than saying, I really cherished that tradition. It really works for me. And I believe you that you would like something else in your practice. So when you find yourself in that defend and protect stance, ask, what am I protecting? Usually, not always, you'll find comfort on the list of things you're defending. So be in a practice of discussing how defensiveness and resistance show up to ideas around new ways for getting to your mission, and always consider power. How is power at play in those relationships and those conversations? These three are really heavy for me. Right to comfort, the belief that I should get to move through any moment of any day and not have to experience discomfort. When I'm part of dominant culture, that is particularly on high volume, because I'm used to being part of the group of people that is right, that is protected, that has access to resources. So then that leads us to power hoarding. Well, if I'm supposed to be, or I deserve to be, or my universally given right is to be comfortable, then I start to hoard power because I see power as limited. That if I'm experiencing discomfort, someone must be taking away from me. And at the same time, I think, and if I don't have to acknowledge that, if I can stay out of conflict, I'll remain comfortable. Conflict is absolutely necessary. And when we're trying to do collective work together, we're smart people with big worldviews who are defending our own comfort. And we need better ways to be in disagreement and stay in relationship and not treat disagreement as a threat to the relationship. So we have to work to understand discomfort is at the root of all of our learning and growth. Feedback and criticism will not kill us. And they won't kill this community. And they won't kill what Unity Church means to you if we can engage in conflict and struggle with each other. We have to practice this antidote, really important when we're in community and we're wrestling with tradition and what's up ahead. Don't require those who raise hard issues to raise them in palatable or acceptable ways. Everybody put your feet on the ground. I felt something there, so just breathe that last one in. Don't require those who raise hard issues to raise them in acceptable ways. Individualism. This gets tricky in a community of liberal theology because you get to have your worldview. I've been in a conversation with a group of peers around academic freedom if folks are paying attention to what's happening at Hamlin, or the right to bear arms, or freedom of speech. And I get to have those freedoms. I also have the benefit of dealing with their impact. I'm allowed to have my worldview. I'm allowed to have my individual experience. And if I choose to be in community, my worldview and experience will bump into other people's, right? And so what's my responsibility if I'm someone who says I want to be in community, but I want to be in community, but don't get you on me? So notice the dominant identities we have and how the places where we experience identity power, our agent identities, really afford us the ability to think of ourselves as singular and not collective. Notice how we're complicit in positioning things as better or the norm. When we frame ideas as better or the norm, it's very dehumanizing. We turn our community into objects. Close your eyes for a moment. When in the last year have you thought or spoke about Unity Church as an object? You can open your eyes. This thing about objectifying each other and our ideas is when we're uncomfortable, when we're wrestling with nuance and complexity, the people at church, as if somehow I'm not in that wrestle because I'm a person who goes to this church. So we can't be in spiritual practice as a community if we think of ourselves as individual and separate. Progress is more quantity over quality. This is the idea that we implicitly rate or grade or rank things and say they're better if more of it happened. It was longer, there were more people, there were more of us, there were more dollars, there were more activities, so that must be progress. It's only better if it's bigger. We forget to set process goals. What will we learn along the way? How will we strengthen our relationship? What will we realize about ourselves? What will be better? What will be different? What will there be less of? Fullness, busyness, helps defend against discomfort. That one like rolled through. Our indigenous relatives remind us of seventh generation thinking. That we are the result of the ripples of 7 generations before us. And what we do now will impact 7 generations ahead of us. And I just don't think we want the next 7 generations to be as full and tired and as busy as we are. Worship of the written word. This is a hard one for smart people. Writing isn't bad. What worship of the written word does is it tells us to only believe things that are written in formal, grammatically correct English and printed. We've lost our ability to share story, to believe experiences that aren't published, and to believe things that aren't in perfect written English. So we have to encourage each other to document and remember in ways that aren't just written. We have to seek knowledge and information and lessons from sources that aren't just books. We have to practice sharing with each other in less formal ways. Not everything has to be a memo. Come back to traditions of storytelling. Come back to multiple ways of knowing. Resist the urge to disbelieve if it's not in a book. Urgency, because I thought of it today, it doesn't have to happen tomorrow. This one's also tough because we know that there's actually a clock ticking in terms of how long this planet is inhabitable. Climate change is urgent. And that doesn't mean we have to do everything fast or now. So how can we get realistic about how quickly things need to be done? How can we remember anything takes longer than anyone would expect? I thought we'd be on part 3 by 11:15. So always consider the range of options that exist. Not everything should happen fast. It's unhealthy. I'm going to send you back to your groups to have a conversation with these 2 questions. Go ahead and write them down or take a picture. You don't have to be in pairs in the center. You don't have to go one at a time around the circle. So engage these questions, have a conversation. You can listen. You're welcome to reflect back what you think you've heard. You're welcome to check your reflections. I think I heard this from you. Is that what I'm hearing? You're allowed to make offers. People might not take them. Or you might say, I'm having an idea. Can I offer this idea? Someone might say, oh, no, I wasn't asking for ideas. No, thank you. And you're not in a fight. So think about the antidotes. Think about one thing that really stuck for you. It's hard to practice all the antidotes all the time in every moment. So think about one that you're like, that sounds hard, or that sounds possible, or I'm moving toward that. So head to your groups and we'll come back at 11:35. Yes.
Will you have these slides available by email or something?
Yes. Everyone will get these slides and a bunch of links after. You may or may not remember that the framing for today was around complexity and conflict. So I don't like conflict. I'm really good at it. And I don't mean that I always win or that I always know what to do, but I move through most of my days expecting that at some point in all of my relationships, there will be conflict. And if there isn't conflict, I just had a mentor say to me, I worry about relationships that don't have conflict in them. And said, Deanna, tell me more about that. And she said, well, I think if we don't occasionally wrestle with our point of view and about our ideas and how we feel differently, we'll be really bad at it when something really pressing comes up. And then we might feel like that conflict represents a departure from the relationship or a departure from the agreements we made about who we are to each other. And so it's very risky to be in relationship, be in community, and not have plans to be in conflict. Because then conflict becomes synonymous with the breaking of the relationship or breaking the promise, rather than conflict being a sign that we're doing a pretty good job of leveraging the multiple lived experiences of the community. And so what I want to layer on is an invitation to conflict practices that support your racial justice work, that support your racial justice ends. You will find yourselves in disagreement about how and what, and even sometimes why. But coming to the conflict will actually strengthen our relationships. It will improve trust. There will be more social capital between and among us. We will be fortified to orient then to problems as us against the problem and not us against each other. And a couple, you're like more vocal coming back. So for folks who were a part of the 2020 series online, we defined conflict, and I think this definition is really important. Conflict in the intercultural sense, for something to be a conflict, three things have to be true. One is perceived incompatibility. The perceived is really important. I believe that our two ideas or our two paths forward can't coexist. I believe that our two ideas or our two paths forward can't coexist. Often not true, but I'm in this stance of like, well, your thing and my thing, and they don't go together, they're contrary. The second is emotional upset. And I don't mean wailing in the street. Emotional upset can be as gentle as, well, that's annoying, to I feel threatened and I'm angry and I'm furious or I'm sad or I'm grieving, right? So emotional upset has this really broad spectrum, and all parties in the conflict don't have to be emotionally upset. It just takes one of us to be on a spectrum. So that's annoying or bothersome too, and furious or sad or grieving. So perceived incompatibility, emotional upset. And the third is between interdependent parties. A belief that we have shared mission or shared vision or shared values. Now, the conflict may be about our mission, our vision, or our values. And I don't just mean like organizational document stuff, like, oh, I actually thought we shared a worldview, and now here we are, we come to a decision, an idea, a conversation, and I'm experiencing you differently than the image of you I had in my head. But I still believe there is an us, right? So we have to perceive our ideas as incompatible. One of us has to care or be bothered. And we're interdependent parties. If those things aren't true, it's probably advocacy or a fight or a win-lose. So the thing about conflict is there are no winners and there are no losers. And there is no better or best idea. There is, so what? Now what? shall we do because we share values and mission. I don't ever have to say I stopped liking my thing and yours is better and I was wrong and you were right to move forward. We can say, because we're fighting individualism and we are a community, we're going to share discomfort and we will make choices where some of us will feel uncomfortable and some of us will feel comfortable. And our goal is to not always make choices where the same people are the most comfortable all the time. So how the heck do we do that? Very carefully, with a lot of water, and a lot of breathing, and a lot of patience, and a lot of practice and commitment and planning before we're ever in conflict. And then in conflict, having the ability to say, I'm not going to let one right way and urgency win right now. Let's pause and find our conflict practices. So what are some of those practices? What are some of the things we might try? Well, first we have to recognize some of the common ways we show up in conflict. What are some of the common ways we show up in conflict? So there's this amazing workbook. It's free and you'll get the link to it, but you have some handouts from it. It's called Turning Towards Each Other. And I want you to draw your attention to the piece of the side of the paper that says the 4 archetypes. This is hard to read up on the screen. So there's 4 archetypes. There's sort of 4 ways we tend to move through conflict. These aren't the only ways we can sort of characterize, but this is one way that helps us think about how do I tend to show up, or what are the ways I might show up in conflict. And what I love about this structure, this framework, is it reminds us that these live in a continuum, so I can move through them. I'm not, oh, I'm this and I'm this forever and I can't be something else. It says, oh, I may arrive to this conflict through the lens of one of these archetypes. And I might need to pull from, flow through, move to one or another in order to be effective, in order to meet the other parties and actually make a next wise action that is in service to the greater mission or vision, and not in service to, well, I know the right or best way. And so we can notice how we are showing up in any of these 4 archetypes by looking at a few things. So first is our relationship to power. When I'm in the victim archetype, I see myself as having no power. I do not have power. Power is being used against me to dominate or extract, and I'm primarily afraid of power. When I'm in warrior stance, my relationship to power is that others have power and I have to fight to get it. There's a they and they have it and I don't, and I have suspicion, mistrust, and I treat power as scarce. When I'm in leader or healer mode, I understand power as both available and accessible to me. I see the possibility of for wholeness and leadership in others. And I know that power can be used to shape and do. I'm feeling a lot of abundance. I'm feeling confidence. I'm noticing the presence of choice or options. When I'm in creator mode, my relationship to power is that power is everywhere. And it flows within, between, among, around us. It's a mutual relationship where I know that maybe you and I and we and the us don't all have access to the same kinds of power, but there isn't any one of us in the group that has no power. So we understand ourselves and each other as emanating power. So we need medicine in all 4 archetypes. When we're in victim mode, we need compassion, humility. We have to practice surrender. We have to practice acceptance. When we're in warrior mode, we need to access the confidence and capability to take action and influence. We have to remember we have agency. When we're in leader and healer mode, we need to remember we've got this sense of vision we can share with the group. We can bring possibility and imagination to the conflict. We can bring creativity and abundance. We can be that reminder that we have choices and that it's a perceived incompatibility, not a certain incompatibility. And in creator mode, we can really offer presence to the conversation. We can offer that we are enough and that there is enough, and that we don't need to treat opportunity or challenge through a scarcity mindset. We can show up with some effortlessness. And effortlessness, again, might be different than comfort or ease. We can create space for whatever wants to arrive. And we can know that and share our knowing that there's limitless possibility. We can flow, we can visit across the archetypes. There's some pitfalls. In victim mode, we can feel helpless, we can feel despair, we can feel depressed, depleted. When we're in warrior mode, everything is a fight. Remember, conflicts aren't fights. There aren't winners. There's wisest choice that serves the interdependent whole. Our friends at Human Systems Dynamics remind us, what's the next wisest action? Not the better action. In leader and healer mode, we might distance ourselves from warrior and victim states. So we might start to think, oh, I should be away from, not include, not welcome in. We can be out of touch or appear out of touch. We can accidentally not acknowledge when things are going wrong. So because we're thinking like wholeness, process, opportunity, we might forget to say, oh, and there actually might be some broken things that we say that's actually not serving us. We can cling unconsciously to an identification with wielding power. So if we might objectify folks in victim and warrior stance and forget that they have contribution to the process. When we're in creator archetype, we can feel kind of stuck because of all this possibility. We're like, oh, well, possibility is limitless. So like, let's stay in process. For any of us in the acceptance mindset on the IDC, for any of us in the acceptance mindset on the IDC who are showing up in creator, we might get stuck. We might say, ooh, let's ask more questions. Let's keep talking. It's probably shouldn't make a decision. So there's some practices. There's some practices for all of them. On the other side of the page, some folks might be familiar. You've been through couples counseling, the Gottman Institute. And at Gottman, they talk about the four deadly horsemen of a relationship. If these things are present, they did this big research study. It said, if these four things are present in an intimate relationship, these people will break or they will get divorced unless they learn to tame them. What the turning toward each other folks with the authors actually started to understand is that's not just true in romantic or intimate one-on-one relationship, but it's true about community and collective relationship. That criticism, so blame, attacking someone's character, and bullying undermine trust. The antidote, the practice that generates trust, I statements, find the wish underneath the criticism. If I have a critique, it's probably because I'm longing for something. Focus on behavior, not the person. You aren't the problem. Maybe you're engaging in some behaviors that are challenging right now. Defensiveness, interestingly enough, undermines trust and is an element of a white supremacy culture. So I might deflect. I might take a posture of self-protection. I have to win out here, or something's being taken from me. Or I might have a lot of justification for my stance. I'm citing these books weird. Worship of the written word shows up with justification. How can I be appreciative? How can I express gratitude for the positive? Again, coming back to I statements and remembering to take responsibility for the impact of how you show up, not how you intended to show up. Additional aspects that undermine trust in the community: contempt, when we demean or mock a worldview or stance or way of being and seeing. Hostility and disrespect, when we undermine or belittle the contributions someone's making. We have to take responsibility. We can accept the other person's description of their experience without saying that's also true for me and it's going to be true for all of us. One of my friends always says, perception is real in its consequences. I can't fight you with how you perceived what's happening. That was your perception. And we're a bunch of people with a bunch of different perceptions. And which direction do we want to go? I don't have to tell you, you didn't experience it that way and it wasn't that way, to make some agreement about, we're going to head this way and find out what we find out. Stonewalling, that can show up as withdrawal or cutting off communication. It can be the silent treatment. I won't engage with you. I'm actively being quiet at you. That's how I like to think about it. Or avoidance, which is different than leaving the relationship or the community. I'm undermining trust if I keep participating in the relationship or community and do these things. I might say, actually, I'm removing myself from the relationship or the community. So I may not engage with members of that relationship or community, right? So there's a nuance there. We really have to ground our nervous systems when we're doing that. Something's up. We're trying to protect something. Our nervous system is sending a danger cue when it might not actually be danger. How can we design conditions so that feelings and requests can be expressed? Oftentimes in community process, we don't put feelings on the agenda. We don't create the time in a process or an engagement or in a relationship to find out how this is landing and what it might mean for how I'm going to show up when we get to the decision making or the idea picking or the resource allocation. And if you're the recipient of stonewalling, notice your responsibility. Have you engaged in the relationship or community in a way that has pushed people away? There's a lot on both sides of these worksheets. I encourage you to find one place that you feel you need to practice, whether it's the practices for the 4 archetypes or whether it's the practices that generate trust. What do you need to engage? What needs your intention? You'll return to your groups. We'll come back here at 12:20. The same questions, but this time with conflict practices. What practices would I like to incorporate and give attention to in my spiritual work and ministry? What do I want to try, shed, release, invite in my spiritual work and ministry? And again, it can be an open and back and forth question. And if someone says no, thank you to your ideas, they still love you. We'll be back here at 12:20.
Now, one final brief segment before we close. So I invite you to grab whatever you need and to return to your seats.
Here they come.
People who are coming back into Parish Hall, please find your seats. We have one shorter segment left before we conclude.
As well. Yeah.
Welcome back, and please find your seats. I trust that there were really moving energy through the conversations. You know, I caught Alfonso wandering around as I try to do as well and eavesdrop and listen. So thank you for your engagement and your presence. Before I invite Alfonso to have the last say and conclude our training today, I just wanted to engage in the church as a practice of gratitude. Gratitude for the members of the Beloved Community staff team. If you're listening, listening up where you are, I'm assuming that institutionally you are all aware that Beloved Community staff team is an extension of the work of the executive team. And so every other week on Thursdays, there is a gathering of the executive team with others who constitute the Beloved Community and coordinate the overarching work of anti-racism, multiculturalism here at the church. And a lot of what the congregants experience is another sort of growth out from even the Beloved Community staff team, which is the communications with the blogs and the wonderful articles, attention to the newsletter. So this is, folks, very much about shared ministry. So I want to appreciate all of you as friends, and really as I look out as the lay leadership engaged in change and conflict and the complexity, the ever deepening complexity. So I hope to see all of you when we engage in spelling out some really salient and generative nodes of this complexity mid-February into mid-March with a series on intersectionality. There is a copied handout of the resources that Alfonso was talking about. For those of you who would like to have a hard copy, admittedly, it won't get you to the links. So what we will do is we will also make live that same page so that it's online and you can click on the links, probably both on the Beloved Community staff team page, and we'll also email it out to you. So you have all of the resources in addition to accessing a recording and the PowerPoint slides that Alfonso mentioned as well. So you'll have all of that together. And lastly, in addition to appreciation among us at Unity Church, I really want to appreciate and include team dynamics. I know that institutionally, organization, you are continuing to evolve in your own way, but our ongoing collaboration and friendship with you really means so much to us at this work. So thank you.
So we'll close as we opened. So first, as you're able, please find the ground with both your feet. Place one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly. Close your eyes as you're able. And take some deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. And notice what your physical body, your heart and your spirit, and your mind are telling you they need. As you prepare to leave this space and go out into the world, be gentle with yourself. Be kind to those who did not have the morning you had, who may not be ready or expecting what you're bringing as a result of today. Keep breathing. Drink water. Notice the tug of certainty, the pull of whiteness as comfort. Remember all you committed to. Remember your goals. Remember the practices you spoke that you wanted to incorporate. And with your next breath, you can return to the room. We'll close with a spell. You have the spell. You get to participate in casting this spell with me. Stand as you are able. I'll say part of it. You'll say it back. As church people, I think you're familiar with how to do that. This is the future shaping spell. What we will see in 20 years is what we shape. Right now, let's shape the future. Repeat after me. We claim the power of our outrageous grief. Our righteous anger. Our responsibility for our precious lives. Our interconnected individual and collective joy. And our impossible magic. We embrace our edges. That they may teach us to grow in right relationship to the living world. Our human messiness, our weird and brilliant wonders. We know how to be in so many incredible ways. With these gifts, we can foment a revolutionary now. That centers love, care, needs, creativity, and magic. We plant the seeds of radical honesty, vulnerability, authenticity, and the kindness that eases inevitable change. We will not settle. We will grow weirder and wilder. More independent. For our liberation, for our liberation, for our liberation. Thank you all. Have an easy day.
Thank you.